This program is a presentation of UCTV for educational and non-commercial use only.
And now for today's speaker, Maureen Stapleton is the General Manager of the San Diego County Water Authority, who provide about 90% of the water for the $163 billion economy and 3 million people in San Diego County, none of which would get along for very long without water. So she's on the front line in planning for growth for Southern California in the face of significant resource constraints and challenges. She's responsible for implementation of the $3.6 billion capital improvement program, including the emergency storage project, as well as the development of the seawater desalination, outdoor conservation, and enhanced recycling. And today she's going to help us learn more about the true value of water. Maureen Stapleton.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. I always enjoy coming up to UCSD. It's always fun to talk to a group here. We get so focused on water and seeking it. Much of my time is spent outside the county going after water for the county that it's great to be home and having an opportunity to talk with you all. As I was being introduced, I was remembering what brought me to water, because my background is not water. I did not deal with water until I moved to the Water Authority. My prior position was Assistant City Manager of the City of San Diego. I've been at the Water Authority nearly 14 years now. In San Diego, I did mostly economic development, redevelopment, planning, land use, engineering. That was the side of the shop that I predominantly dealt with. What brought me to water was the 1991 drought. How many of you were in San Diego in 1991? Lots of you. You remember it. It was pretty devastating. I was doing a lot of work with the Economic Development Corporation, doing business attraction, retention, and expansion. And I remember specifically the president of the Biocom had come into my office. We had been working with him on a number of issues, and had come into my office one day and threw down on my conference table a bunch of bottles of water. And I said, you know, David, what's this about? Why'd you bring me water? And he said, Maureen, look at the label, the various labels on the water I brought you. I said, okay, picked one up. And it says, move your business to North Carolina. We have water supply. Next one, Arizona. That one really ticked me off. Phoenix, you know, come plentiful supplies. Colorado, Texas. What was happening was, because we were then in a 31% cut in our water supply in 1991, there was a huge push on our businesses to have them move to where there was reliable water. It was probably the first time that I walked down to the department head in charge of water. I walked down there and said, Mylan, what's going on? What's happening? You know, we pay attention to roads and schools. We pay attention to land use decisions, zoning, and general plans. But it was that aha moment for me that I knew the essential and preciousness of water supply for our economy. I've been a public servant my whole life. I am committed to give back to the community, and I can think of no more essential service that I can give back to than water supply, and ensuring when you turn on your tap, water flows. So let me tell you what we're doing. We're a wholesale water supplier to all of the retail agencies here in San Diego County, meaning if you're served by a city or you're served by a municipal water district or an irrigation district, we supply them all of the imported water. We have 24 member agencies, which are our retailers. As you can see, we have 6 cities, 14 water utilities, 3 irrigation districts, and the military. It's always nice to have Camp Pendleton with us. Nothing like having weapons as one of your member agencies. We represent most of the county. Where we don't represent, think of it, Julian, Alpine, that area. They are predominantly on groundwater, and we do not serve them. We have fundamental mission. It's really threefold. One is to provide a safe and reliable water supply. It's our essential. It's to diversify our water supply sources to increase our reliability. And then it's to build, maintain, and operate a very large infrastructure system in a cost-effective and environmentally sensitive manner. We do this by developing plans. One thing about water is it doesn't go quickly. Anything you're working on in water really takes years, if not decades, to accomplish. And that has been the challenge. Our strategic plan is a 25-year strategic plan developed by the board and adopted. That strategic plan has essential elements of water supply, water facilities, leadership, a variety of issues in there. The next plan we have is the 5-year business plan. We are held accountable for performance on specific goals with a specific timeline, and those goals get us closer and closer to ultimate water reliability for our region. And then just a few weeks ago, our board adopted our operating budget and our capital improvement budget. We do 2-year budgets. There's no point in doing a single-year budget. We're really much longer term than that. So we do them 2 years at a time. My budget for the next 2 years is just over $1.6 billion. This is our world in San Diego. Where are we? Where is the water? This really says it all about the challenges we have to ensure water reliability for our region. We live on imported water up to 90% per year, meaning 9 out of 10 glasses of water have been imported from hundreds of miles away, either the Colorado River or our Bay Delta. You can see that the precipitation map is not very encouraging either, considering the climate changes that the western United States has experienced. So what do you do and how do you develop water when you have this kind of challenge? This is how we use water in California. You can see that agriculture takes more than half of the supply of water in California each and every year. The Central Valley and the Imperial Valley are the largest farming areas and the most productive in the United States. It is where most of the water goes. The second largest is the environmental, which is ensuring stream flow, delta movement, that you don't have seawater intrusion in bay areas. All of that is critically important, and about 35% of California's water is used for environmental purposes. Only 13% is used for residential, industrial, and commercial, open space, public agencies, military, and so forth. Often people are surprised at this, at how small the urban use is of all California water. This is how we use water in San Diego. And as you can see, we do not, environmental is not on here. We do not keep track of the flows in the streams in San Diego County. But as you can see, we are not heavy agricultural. You know, we have a lot of our, we're the avocado capital of the world still. But besides that, the flower fields, some of the high value crops, because of the cost of water, the cost of land in San Diego County, we do not have that much agriculture. What's interesting too is we don't have a lot of commercial industrial because we do not have a lot of heavy manufacturing. Again, it has a lot to do with the economics of manufacturing in San Diego County. Nearly 60% of our water is used by residential, and of that 60%, about 60% of the residential use is outdoor water use. So, I hope by now you have heard that we have a water shortage. Please tell me you've heard we have a water shortage. I've spent a lot of time and money to make sure you know we have a water shortage. The Metropolitan Water District, which is one of our major suppliers, has cut San Diego off by 13% this year, starting July 1. We, with our member agencies, our job now is to manage to the water supply that we have, which means we need to reduce demand. Because of the Imperial Irrigation District water transfer that was negotiated and completed in 2003, and I think many of you know that we have just finished lining the Coachella and the All-American canals in conserved water. Because we were able to do those deals, our 13% cut from Met has been softened to an 8% cut across our region. 5 years from now, it will be softened even greater because that water supply coming from Imperial is ramping up each and every year for the next 15 years. What is unfortunate is that our agricultural agencies, because they're getting discounted water, they signed a deal that said they would take a much larger hit than the municipal and industrial folks. So our agricultural areas are taking between a 13 and a 30% cut in water today. They took it last year and they're taking it again this year. All you have to do is drive up I-15 and you can see a lot of the avocado groves that are stumped. The idea of the stumping is that the plant goes into suspension. They can do it for about 2 years, and then they must reapply water if they're going to save that grove. So the idea is to stump it. They stumped them last year. They're continuing the mode of no water to them for 1 more year, and then they're hoping next year that water is available to regrow that tree. So we are in the second level. It's called the Drought Alert. And that alert, as you know, also comes with a condition of water use restrictions. I call them no-brainers. Water use restrictions for our region, such as outdoor watering 3 days a week, not doing it between the hours of, I think it's 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. It's basically efficient use of water in your home and in your business. As I said, up to 90% of our water comes from outside the region. And you can see here in 2008, we had over 80% of the water came in. State Water Project, the Bay Delta, represents nearly 30% of our water. And you all know that we've got challenges there. On the Colorado River is over 50% of our imported supplies. And then the remaining supplies come from local. 18%. Local supplies include our runoff, but we have so little rain, there's not that much runoff. Groundwater, we have very small amounts of groundwater. All of our groundwater is brackish because of seawater intrusion, but what we do have, we do desalinate and utilize. And then recycling is part of it, conservation is part of it. So you can see that it's 18% and it's growing. Now, let me tell you about the perfect storm of water. And we are in the perfect storm. We have 3 distinct challenges that have come to our water supply, and they are coming at the exact same time. You all have heard about the regulatory restrictions on the Bay Delta due to the Delta smelt. There is a substantial crash of the ecosystem in the Bay Delta. A federal judge has imposed severe pumping restrictions on the Bay Delta, and as a result, we are getting less water. The second one is the droughts that have been occurring. We have had significant drought conditions in California in the last 3 years. The last 8 out of 10 years on the Colorado River have been drought conditions. And our major reservoirs are at 50% or lower in capacity. All you have to do is go to like San Luis Reservoir up in Northern California. The water is below the final intake. They can't take any more out of it because it is so low. In Lake Mead and Lake Powell, if you've been there, we call those the bathtub rings. They range between 150 and 200 feet high, the bathtub rings, and that's from droughts. And then the third issue is the climate change impacts, and I want to talk a little bit about each. There's the bathtub rings on the Colorado River. In 2007 was the 8th year of a drought. We no longer had surplus supplies we could pull from on the Colorado River. Those had gone away because of these conditions. And the Colorado River aqueduct, which used to run completely full, is only running half full due to the restrictions we have on the Colorado River. 2008, although we had 117% of snowfall, we had only about 103% of runoff. We love the additional runoff, but the ground was so dry in the watershed that a lot of it seeped in. 2009, they end about May. This year, again, the snowpack was slightly above average, but the runoff is in the 85 to 88%. And again, it's because of the dry conditions in the watershed, as well as having some of these early melts, late melts. It depends on when your snow is melting and how quickly it melts, depends on what runoff you receive. The reason the Colorado River has been able to supply all of the 7 states that use it is because they have 60 million acre-feet of capacity, which is equivalent to 5 years' worth of the river running, meaning that during these drought years, we've been drawing down these enormous reservoirs. Had we not had those reservoirs, we would have had a much more severe shortage earlier on. But because they're so big, we actually can draw them down substantially over a period of time and be able to continue to supply. I will tell you, though, that historically, we just finished this past year an agreement which was many years in the making, and that is between and among the 7 basin states that use the river: Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, California. And that was a shortage sharing agreement. Now you can imagine getting into a room, that small room of 50, people, 40 of them attorneys. How many attorneys do I have in the room? I'm so sorry, but 40 of them are attorneys, and they're holding all these law of the river. We don't have one law of the river, we have a series of laws in the river, and trying to come up with a cooperative shortage sharing agreement between and among these states that have to go back and report to their governors on why they agreed to take less water. It took us over 2 years of meetings, and we were successful to come to a conclusion and to come to an agreement. But it kind of tells you, if you are getting the Wild West states agreeing to shortage sharing, you know that, in fact, we believe the possibility is real. That's just one of our supplies. Here's the Delta. We have a variety of risks on the Delta. We have fishery declines. The Delta smelt has completely crashed. We used to have thousands of smelt in the river and the Bay Delta system. Now they're finding hundreds. And it's one of the reasons the pump restrictions have been put in place. We have seismic risks. Those levees were built, some of them 100 years ago. They are not earthquake-proof, earthquake-resistant, or even considered an earthquake at that time. That whole area is heavy with peat, and they're earthen levees. We have tremendous flooding risks. In 2004, we had a major breach on a beautiful day of one of our levees. It was called Jones Track. It completely flooded the area, took millions of dollars to stop the flow, and it took months to bring it back. These are the challenges we have on the Bay Delta. And I think the state legislature and the governor is dealing with the Bay Delta in that same fabulous mode they're dealing with the state budget, which is ignore it until it becomes a crisis. And let me tell you, we are at near crisis mode on the Bay Delta. The Bay Delta is a terribly difficult, politically charged issue with many stakeholders, many problems, many implications. And it will take tremendous leadership and just straight on guts to make the solutions move forward. And right now, we do not have the stars aligned politically in order to move it forward. I think that we're getting closer because the crisis is getting bigger, but as of today, we've not been able to garner that political leadership we need to make the tough decisions on the Bay Delta. Let me show you. This is typically from a dry to a wet year. This is typically the water Southern California would get. And it doesn't matter how much it is. I've got the acre feet down. But in dry years, we get less because there's less supply. In wet years, we get a whole lot more because we can pump more water's flowing through the Bay Delta. When Judge Wanger, he's a very thoughtful federal judge. This is not some judge that you would immediately go and appeal their decision. When Judge Wanger looked at the impact of the crashing of the Delta smelt, which is an indicator species in the Bay Delta, he imposed pumping restrictions. This is how much water we lost. We lost some in dry years and a whole lot in wet years. So this is, when I talk about double whammies, this really is one, which is in dry years, you're desperate for the supply, and we lose 24% of our supply. In wet years is the opportunity for you to refill your reservoirs that you use as carryover so you can use that water in dry years. We lose 43% of our supplies. Now, to make matters worse, there is, the Delta smelt has a cousin named the longfin smelt, and it is now threatened. So it has been thrown into the mix. In addition, there is the winter run salmon, or the Chinook salmon, and we now have another Wanger decision which has extended the pumping restrictions in the Bay Delta, meaning that they're going to last over, instead of them being 9 months a year, now it's 10 months a year. And we still have the green sturgeon, another endangered species that is yet to be brought to court to determine what the pumping restrictions will be for that fish as well. It's a challenge, and we're seeking leadership to move us forward. It will take enormous effort to get this Bay Delta solved. And it's going to, I think it's going to make or break, to be honest. It will make or break political careers, the economic vitality of California, and to some extent, our future. I cannot emphasize strongly enough how important the Bay Delta and getting a solution for it is for this region. So let's move to the third part of the perfect storm, climate change. We all know that the IPCC report really talked about global warming's already happening, where it's going to accelerate most likely over the next decades, and that greenhouse gas reductions can mitigate some of these climate change impacts that we're now seeing. What's going to happen, obviously, the predictions are that we've already increased 1 degree Fahrenheit since 1900. They're projecting in this century we'll go between 2 and 12 degrees additional increase in temperature. The global levels of precipitation will increase. That can be good news for some areas and not so good for others, because generally wet regions will get wetter and dry regions will get drier. And just go back to the map I showed you. We're in a dry region. More intense storms and more increased flooding. From a water resource standpoint, the impacts that we will experience is decreased snowpack and earlier snow melt. That's a huge issue in California. We do not have a lot of reservoirs in California because our biggest reservoir in California is the Sierra Nevadas. All of you have seen the snow surveying. That's where our water is kept in the winter. And then as it warms, the water is slowly released and we pick it up and use it. If we have less snowpack, we have less storage. If we have quicker warming, that means the water will flow quicker out of whatever snowpack we have, and we've not made any arrangements to capture that water and hold it for the summer months. So it's a challenge to us as well. We have more rain, increased runoff, and altered water quality. Because rain, the water quality from rain is different than water quality from snowpack, you will have water quality issues. Increased demand due to higher temperatures. Obviously, if it is warmer weather like it is today, you're watering your lawns, you're doing more outdoors with water than you were in June when we had June gloom. Well, if we are increasing our temperature 2 to 12 degrees, we're going to be using more water. And then because of the sea level, potential sea level rise, you have increased saltwater intrusion. And that obviously can have huge impacts for our groundwater, for other aquifers that are sitting near the ocean. So now I'm going to be the optimist. Where have we been and where are we going? In 1991, you see in that upper left-hand corner, we were 95% dependent on a single supplier. Only 5% of our supplies came from local, and it was predominantly local yield through the reservoirs and the runoff during rains. It was clear that water reliability came with water diversification. Just like you have a financial portfolio diversified, you must have your water supply portfolio diversified. And we set in 1991, the Water Authority set out to diversify its water supply portfolio at a speed that no other water agency in California or the West had ever been able to accomplish. By 2010, the next full water year we will have reduced the single supplier to only 62% of our supplies will now come from Metropolitan Water District. Another 20% come from, it's noted as QSA, that's Quantification Settlement Agreement. That's the Imperial Valley water supplies. We are purchasing dry year transfers, meaning in dry years we're going out doing deals where farmers fallow, we take the water. When there's wet years, they go back into production. And then local supplies, 16%, which includes conservation, that's the green bar, groundwater, recycling. All of those are important in our local supplies. By 2020, we will have taken our 16% local supplies and moved them up to 40%. Huge increase in local reliability. The Imperial Valley QSA supplies will represent just over 30%, and then the MWD supplies will represent a little less than 30%. In addition, we're adding seawater desalination. which is, as you know, an important piece of our portfolio. A lot of people ask, is desal the answer? And I'm here to tell you there is no one silver bullet in water reliability. It isn't conservation, it isn't recycling, it isn't desalination, it is all of them. It is like saying, I hear people say, you know, Maureen, the answer is conservation. If you just conserve, you'll be fine. That's ridiculous. It's like saying to work on a car, you only need one wrench. Of course you don't. You need multiple tools in your toolbox to handle complex issues. And let me tell you, water supply is one of the most complex issues you can deal with. You must have them all. You have to be able to be flexible each and every year as situations change, supply changes, challenges come to us. If I can leave you with one thought, it is no silver bullet. You have to have silver buckshot. That's the answer. Now, value of water considerations. I want to talk about how do you value water and what truly is the value of water. I want to talk about cost of service, the hydrology, source, application of use, and the economic impacts. As a public agency, we are allowed to charge the cost of the service to the user, meaning we can't make a profit. Our job is to determine what it costs us and to pass those costs on to the user. And in water supply, when you purchase water, we sell our water to our retail agencies and they sell it to you. We include a supply charge, a transportation charge, a storage charge, treatment, water treatment charge, and then the distribution charge, the smaller pipes. So this makes up our cost of service. Seems relatively simple. But there are supply source variations, and that the location of the supply versus the location of the use can have tremendous impact on what the cost of water is. If you are buying water, but it's in Northern California, it will cost you a whole lot more than if you're buying water and it's 10 miles away. Northern California is much closer to the supply source, obviously, and as a result has a significant reduction in its transportation costs. Also, it is the amount of snowpack or rain in a given year. And this is really the scarcity issue. You can buy a lot of water when there's an El Nino, and you can buy it cheap. This year, buying water has been tremendously difficult because there's so little supply, and that supply that there is troubling to get through the Bay Delta. So rain and snowpack have a huge impact on the cost of water. Local supplies, that often relates to the technology that's being used to garner that supply. Seawater desalination is a lot more expensive than some of the other groundwater, let's say desalination, because it has to be desalinated. The water is much more saline coming in from the ocean than the groundwater. And then you have, obviously, conservation, recycling. Let me show you a cost comparison. This is a chart that really shows by an acre foot, and an acre foot of water is about the amount of water 2 households use in a year. So you use about a half an acre foot a year for an average household. So you can see seawater desalination, core supplies, which means our water rights supplies that we receive on a year in, year out basis, dry year transfers that we do during particularly dry years, groundwater demineralization, recycling, and conservation. You can see how much they vary. And let me take recycling for an example. You can see there's a wide range of cost that can be attributed to recycling. And again, it is the source of the original water, what's the quality of the water you're getting, and then what is the treatment you're doing, and how much is the transportation to move that recycled water to its end user. Seawater desalination, another example. Are you using an existing intake or are you constructing a brand new intake? What environmental challenges must you mitigate for? That has a huge impact on what the cost is. And then ultimately, what's the cost of your power and your technology that you're using in the desal plant? I said hydrology considerations were particularly important. Surplus or scarcity. The regional variations have a huge impact as well. Water that is coming out of Mammoth and Owens Valley is moving down the LA aqueduct, and actually, because that is an older aqueduct, it has been paid for many times over. That water is ultimately cheaper than moving it through the Bay Delta, the west side of the Sierra Nevadas, because of, again, environmental challenges, the mitigation requirements, the cost of energy, moving them over to Tehachapi's, a variety of things. So wet-dry cycles are important, as well as the scarcity and the surplus. Application of use. How much is water worth to agriculture? It depends on the crop. It's as simple as that. High-value crops are willing to pay much more than low-value crops. The cost of water for our agricultural community is one of the highest in the country, if not in the nation. That is why you will rarely see row cropping in San Diego County. It is not worth it. That's why you have the flower fields, the nurseries, the citrus and avocado groves, because they must have high-value crops in order to make business go. However, in Central Valley, they pay a lot less for water, and they pay a lot less for land, and so as a result, they do what would be considered low-value crops in many areas, a variety of vegetables, wheat, and so forth. And then if you go to Imperial Valley, where water is very cheap, you can see large, large farms that are doing alfalfa, wheat, and so forth. Urban depends on the urban use of what is the use, and again, what is the value to them of water for that use. Is it commercial? Is it industrial? Is it residential? Would you pay more for reliable water inside your house than outside your house? Again, as a public agency, we cannot and do not value water based on the value to the end individual. We base it on cost of service. But I think these are fundamental questions we need to begin to ask as the scarcity of our water and the preciousness of the supply become a true reality here in San Diego. And then finally, the use of water for environmental purposes. What is the value of the retention of that environmental resource to our county or to the state? And how much are we willing to pay for the retention of that resource? Obviously, the worth of water is dependent on the economic impact. That's a real easy one to work at. But in valuation considerations, you really have both the quantitative, what's the impact of less or no water? If you have less water, what does it do? How does it hurt your business? How does it hurt your manufacturing? What does it do? But there's also a qualitative. As we've been out talking about conservation, I have a lot of people come up and say, I just hate the idea of seeing our luscious green lawns go away. That's important to them. It's very qualitative. It's, there's something about it that, gives them pleasure. Now, I get a lot of pleasure from seeing California native plants, but, I'm probably different now. But it's also a quality of life issue. So there is no one specific formula, I believe, that you can use to determine ultimately the value of water. We have multiplier factors in the regional economy. Obviously, I'll give you one easy one is tourism. You know, if you reduce your water supply, it impacts your tourism. What do you think the multiplier factor is of substantially reduced tourism? It's more than just a simple calculation to determine the value of water. And it really goes to the ultimate use of that water that says what it should cost or could cost. Where are we heading with our water future? You tell me, is that glass half full or is it half empty? If you're in the water business, it must be half full. You must be an optimist. It is an arcane industry with laws and water rights that go back decades, if not hundreds of years. But you know where your mission and your vision has to be, and that is water reliability for our region, so that when you turn on your tap, that the water flows. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
How close are we to using the toilet-to-tap tertiary process to recover the water that's just being pumped out to the ocean? That would be very valuable to us.
There's a pilot program that has been approved by the City of San Diego. It's a 2-year program to do what's called indirect potable reuse, which means that they take the highly treated recycled water, treat it to basically drinking water standards, and then put it into the reservoir to blend with imported or local supplies. It comes back out and it is treated yet again. I need to tell you, I have a really strong feeling about this issue, which is if you don't think you're drinking, as you said, toilet to tap water now, you're missing a very important piece of information. Colorado River has over 270 discharge permits on the river, meaning that their effluent is flowing into the river, being diluted. We ultimately pick it up and move it in and treat it to very high water quality standards. The United States has the highest water quality standards for public use of any nation in the world. So the issue is you don't measure what's going into your treatment plant, you measure what's coming out of your treatment plant. I have a staff member that says, drink a beer in Las Vegas, 3 days later you're drinking it in San Diego. So this idea that we're not, sorry, I'm on a tangent now, sorry. This idea that somehow, and I hate that reference of toilet to tap because it isn't a fair reference at all. Now, on the other side, people say, well, Maureen, I don't understand why it's not being done right now. Look at Orange County. Orange County is doing it. Orange County is putting their highly treated water into groundwater. And I will tell you right now that groundwater apparently is acceptable for doing this blending, that the Department of Public Health, State of California, has done groundwater recharge, and then you bring it back up and you retreat it again, has been doing it for a number of years. And it's the idea that if it's in groundwater, Mother Nature grabs it, hugs it, gives it a big kiss, makes it clean, and out it goes. We don't have groundwater, so we have to put it in San Vicente Reservoir, our largest reservoir, mix it with imported. But Mother Nature apparently doesn't hug in reservoirs. She only hugs in groundwater, which is nonsense. There is only one other place in the country that has been permitted to do basically indirect potable reuse through reservoirs. But I believe that's just a matter of time because from a scientific standpoint, there is no difference of injecting in groundwater versus augmenting a reservoir.
The one thing that we weren't talking about during this presentation was restricting growth. It seems to me that over the last decade, by just building and building and building, and adding to the population, we're just adding to the problem. Has there been any discussion, at least in terms of either restricting hookups? I know in Cambria, in the Central Coast, they've done that, until we solve or at least get a better handle on the water problem.
I think a couple things. Right now, there is certainly in our next level, level 3, there is a restriction on meter hookups. So, and I do know some of the retail agencies have put that restriction on. What a lot of the work we're doing now is what we call no-net development, meaning that we're working with developers in certain areas, especially in large development, to first make the project as efficient as possible, second, see if there's another source of water that can be brought into the project, and then the third is, if that is not possible, then have that developer pay for extension of the purple pipes to a park so that the park could be then hooked up to recycled water instead of potable water, and then they would have basically no net increase in water use for that development. Tying development to an essential service or commodity infrastructure, I don't think is the right way to go. We tried to do it with roads, we tried to do it with schools in the 80s and 90s. The real issue is you need to make really wise decisions on land use, and then you need to ensure you're having the most efficient development related to water use, and then ultimately determining how to supply that water. Cambria does not have many other opportunities for source. Unlike San Diego, which is hooked up to one of the largest water transportation systems in the world. And I think that's the big difference. The water is there for us, but our local government, our county government needs to make wise land use decisions, and then my job is to make sure they have the water to do it.
Two questions, one related to the future pie chart. You showed desalination as a fairly large source. To the best of my knowledge, there's one large-scale desalination plant operating in the U.S. in Tampa Bay. It took forever and it cost a bloody fortune. And it's only been operating for a year. The other is on conservation, that within Southern California, the city of Long Beach seems to have had tremendous success with conservation. So maybe you could talk about what you have done with the retail agencies here in the county to study Tampa Bay and Long Beach and see whether anything there is applicable to us and whether we're really going to achieve that supply in your pie chart.
Right. The desalination plant, we've got two, actually three that we're looking at right now. One is coming, hopefully begin construction at the end of the year. It's the private development through Poseidon at Carlsbad, the Encina plant, and that should begin construction by end of year. In addition, we're looking on Camp Pendleton. We're working with the Marine Corps for a potential siting of desalination on their site. They do have some water challenges. And we're looking at a cooperative arrangement with Mexico. Tijuana, Ensenada, Tecate, they have water challenges just like Southern California. We're looking at if there's a benefit of economies of scale on desalination with Mexico as well. We know Tampa Bay extremely well. We've studied it. We've personally visited it numerous times. I know the general manager quite well, and there's quite a few lessons learned. You know, it's we've been on the bleeding edge as the Water Authority in some of our activities, such as the Imperial Irrigation District water transfer, which was 8 years in negotiations and took probably years off everybody involved. It took years off our life. But it was worth it because it will generate 280,000 acre feet a year for decades to come. Desalination is a lot like that. I'm glad we're not on the bleeding edge like Tampa Bay, which is they went through a lot of rough startup time, and that the improvement in the actual technology is remarkable from when their plant was designed to today. So that's huge. Desalination will represent about 10% of our total supplies. And again, it's no silver bullet, but it's an important piece of that supply. Now, regarding conservation, We are probably one of the leaders, certainly in California, if not in the country. We've received numerous awards for our incentive program, our rebate program, our outreach programs. When we did the 20-gallon challenge last year, we generated over 35,000 acre-feet of conserved water. Right now, today, since we started the summer, we're over 20% down in expected water use. Our community has come to the challenge of reducing water use in our region. This warm weather, it'll be interesting to see what my July numbers look like. Are they going to hold to that conservation? But right now, the community is responding, and I'm extremely pleased.
Good morning, Maureen.
Good morning.
In the area of desalination, I've been here from 1998. I came in as an advisor for Sandag. A good friend named Mike McLaughlin. We go way back. I was actually a Reagan guy for the Caribbean for desal and infrastructure. I was a part of your Baja, California. I deal with Bechtel. I do refinery development. I came and I've been working with Mayor Cox, unknown to you, to see how Chula Vista tying into Tijuana, because Vicente Fox was supposed to be the guy with the business accolade to put a GE turbine with 100 million desalination, and that would have helped pump water back to Otay Mesa. You get a water, and we're going to take care of Tijuana and Mexico with their water and energy issues.
Right.
What's San Diego Water Authority position in doing a public-private partnership?
Absolutely. We do both public-private partnerships, totally public funded, totally private funding. I mean, it's whatever gets the job done. And so you're absolutely right. One of the, obviously, if we do a joint effort with Mexico, if it's wherever it's located, the water would be in our southernmost region, and we would pump it north into the Otay Mesa area, Chula Vista area, National City area. So it would be coming up our aqueducts. And it, again, it's an opportunity where you have two regions directly adjacent to each other that have the exact same needs. A burgeoning population, far away from its water sources, and looking for additional supplies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Steve Ray, and I have a question regarding pricing of water. Is there a free market for this water that we import, or a free market price? And then what has happened to that price over, say, the last 10 years? And do you have any guesstimates going forward?
I have almost an assurance, and that is the price will go up. Let's start there. It's very interesting because you're absolutely right. In this dry year, when we've been out basically wining and dining agricultural areas in Central and Northern California to see if we could come up with an arrangement where they could fallow some water, or they could draw down the reservoir, or they could do groundwater in lieu, meaning we would take their surface water, they would pump more from their groundwater. Price has been a very difficult one. Clearly, they're making a profit. They are making a profit on their sale of water to us. That's allowed by law. And so they see it as an opportunity in which to get additional monies to reinvest in their infrastructure. So if we have an El Nino next year, I will be able to buy water cheap, but I also don't have a place to put it right now. I think you all know that we're raising San Vicente Dam, had a ceremony last week, and ultimately I'll be able to place it in San Vicente. Water is going to go up because in the past it was build a pipe and the supply would be at the end. And that has changed now to supply is everything, so that all of the water that's been accounted for is now being used. And so it's a matter of moving the water around, making agriculture more efficient so that urbans can use more of their water. That's going to cost more money than our traditional cheaper supplies. Our fundamental Colorado River supplies on the river cost 25 cents an acre foot. That's the charge from the Bureau of Reclamation. Now, it costs a whole lot of money to get it here, but it costs a quarter to buy it. The Imperial Irrigation District water is costing $350 an acre foot. So if you had the right in 1928, that's when the Colorado River rights were. 1928, we got our rights and they're worth a quarter. But to buy water today is well over $300.
Hello, I have two questions. Is rainwater harvesting economical in this part of the country? And the second is there any movement to check or control hormone levels in drinking water?
Good questions. Rainwater harvesting to date has not penciled out as being economical. There are areas where in small rainwater harvesting, you know, at your house, your gutters and so forth, but to do actual systems, because San Diego has so little rainwater, it right now isn't penciling out as one of the best opportunities. Last year we got 3¼ inches of rain the whole year. This year we got about, I think it's 8 or 9 inches. We're just not in an area where that's been most helpful. Your second question was? Oh, the pharmaceuticals. One of the biggest challenges in our water supply, and it's in all water supply, is the introduction of pharmaceuticals, because traditionally we've been told to dispose of pills you no longer use. Hospitals did it as well. You just take the pills and flush them. Right, well, you know, the fish are getting injected with huge amounts of hormones and pharmaceuticals, and that is coming within our system. Couple things. Number one is that the increase in technology of treatment actually is capturing, I think, some of the pharmaceutical problems. The San Diego County Water Authority constructed, we call it the Twin Oaks Water Treatment Plant in San Marcos. It's the largest membrane water treatment plant in the world. That treatment opportunity really is addressing a lot of the pharmaceuticals. However, I think what's more important is a multiple prong approach, which is number one, we've got to change the federal law of disposal of drugs, because it isn't helpful at all that hospitals and population are basically putting them into our water. However, secondly, it really goes to the treatment element, which is to ensure that our technology can capture those pharmaceuticals and remove them in the water. That's going to be ultimately the answer. Usually your water quality measurements are parts per million, and I believe they're finding pharmaceuticals in parts, not per billion, they're finding them in parts per trillion. So they're so small that many of the agencies do not have that capacity to actually detect them even. So I think you're going to see within the next 5 years, you're going to see some major effort in this area, both in setting standards as well as in the treatment issue.
Well, that was really enlightening, and the one encouraging thing I come away with is what great leadership we have at the County Water Authority.